Seven friends went on a hike and mysteriously vanished. 5 years later, their car was discovered abandoned in the woods with a disturbing revelation. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning of May 17, 2016 dawned with a crisp clarity that seemed to promise adventure. Sandra Fletcher stood on her front porch, watching as her daughter Emma and 6 friends loaded the last of their camping gear into an old turquoise van they had lovingly restored together over countless weekends. The scene before her was one of youthful exuberance. 7 college seniors preparing for one final adventure before graduation would scatter them across the country. "Here," Sandra said, handing out steaming travel mugs of coffee. "Something to keep you warm on the drive." Emma accepted the mug with a smile that reminded Sandra so much of her late husband. At 21, Emma was his spitting image, especially when wearing his red jacket, the one he'd given her before the car accident that took his life 7 years ago. Emma never went hiking without it. "Everybody get together for a picture," Emma called out, gathering her friends on the porch steps. The 6 young men clustered around her. Tyler Monroe, the natural leader whose father owned half the businesses in Ashland. Jason Chen, computer genius with a Microsoft job waiting in Seattle. Marcus Washington, basketball star with professional prospects. The Bennett twins, Kevin and Kyle, with their matching outdoor gear and plans for a Patagonian expedition. And Derek Collins, pre-med student headed for Boston in the fall. Emma held her phone at arm's length, capturing them all with the van and distant mountains as backdrop. "Our last hurrah," she typed as a caption, posting it to Instagram and sending it to their parents before pocketing her phone. Sandra hugged her daughter tightly. "Come back in one piece," she whispered, feeling an inexplicable tightness in her chest as she watched them pile into the van. Emma waved from the passenger window as Tyler navigated down the driveway, music already blaring from the speakers. The turquoise van wound its way along Highway 82, carrying 7 bright futures toward the Eagle Cap Wilderness. Inside, conversation flowed between plans for the hike and post-graduation dreams. "Did you finalize your apartment in New York?" Jason asked Emma, as he studied the trail map spread across his knees. "Almost. I still can't believe I got that photography." "Fellowship," Emma replied, her camera already in hand, capturing the changing landscape outside her window. By 11:47 that morning, they had reached the trailhead. Emma took another photo as they signed the visitor log, documenting their intended route, the Ice Lake Trail, a moderately difficult path popular among experienced hikers. "We'll be back Sunday evening," Tyler reminded everyone as they shouldered their packs, just in time for the pre-graduation dinner. None of them knew these would be the last documented moments of the 7 friends together. Sunday, May 22nd arrived with gathering storm clouds. Sandra glanced repeatedly at the kitchen clock as she prepared dinner. 6:30 came and went with no word from Emma. By 7:15, she had called her daughter's phone 5 times, each call going straight to voicemail. "They probably lost track of time," Sandra reassured herself. "Or they're in a dead zone." By 8 o'clock, she had called Tyler's parents. Robert Monroe's confident voice did little to settle her growing anxiety. "I'll call the Forest Service just to be sure," he promised. Minutes later, he called back, his tone noticeably changed. "They've had severe storms in that region for the past 3 days. Roads might be washed out." When Monday morning arrived with still no contact, panic began to spread among the families. The university's morning classes revealed 7 empty seats where the friends should have been. By afternoon, Robert and Margaret Monroe had made the 8-hour drive to the Eagle Cap trailhead, arriving at dusk to find an empty parking lot with no sign of the turquoise van. "It's like they've vanished into thin air," Margaret later told police, her voice breaking. Sheriff Bill Hawkins of Wallowa County mobilized search teams immediately, but faced a daunting challenge. Eagle Cap Wilderness encompassed over 360,000 acres of dense forest, steep mountains, and deep canyons. "We're looking at 12 possible routes they could have taken from that trailhead," Hawkins explained to the assembled families that night. His office walls were covered with maps, red circles marking potential search areas. The first 48 hours proved chaotic. Helicopters buzzed overhead, while teams with search dogs combed the most popular trails. Recent storms had turned paths into mudslides and swollen creeks into raging torrents, washing away potential evidence. "It's like looking for 7 needles in hundreds of haystacks," one rescuer commented, after the second day yielded nothing. Sandra spent sleepless nights clutching Emma's spare red jacket, identical to the one her daughter had worn into the wilderness. Behind her closed bedroom door, she allowed herself to cry, but in public, she maintained a fierce determination. "My daughter knows those mountains," she insisted to reporters who had begun to arrive. "She inherited her love of nature from her father. She'll find a way back." On the 4th day of searching, Sheriff Hawkins called the families together with troubling news. His weathered face looked grave as he revealed what traffic camera analysis had uncovered. The turquoise van had never been captured on any of the main roads leading to the Eagle Cap trailhead, suggesting that for some unknown reason, the 7 friends had taken an alternative, unmapped route to their destination. The revelation about the missing van's route sent ripples of confusion through the search operation. Sheriff Hawkins immediately expanded the search parameters, calling in additional resources to explore secondary forest roads and unmarked paths that meandered through the wilderness. His command center, once organized around the main trailheads, now resembled a chaotic web of possibilities. "We need to verify every logging road, every fire access path, every hunter's trail," Hawkins instructed his team, marking new routes on the increasingly crowded map. "They must have entered the wilderness somewhere, and we're going to find that point." At Southern Oregon University, the absence of the 7 students had transformed from concerning to alarming. The campus administration called an emergency meeting in the Social Sciences Hall, where University President Sarah Jenkins stood before hundreds of silent students. "It is with a heavy heart that we officially announce the postponement of this year's graduation ceremony," she announced, her voice echoing in the unnaturally quiet auditorium. "Our thoughts remain with our missing students and their families during this difficult time." After the announcement, dozens of students made their way to the dormitory where Tyler and Jason had shared a room. The door had become an impromptu memorial, covered with flowers, notes, and photographs. Inside, everything remained untouched. Jason's half-empty coffee cup still sat on his desk, now cold and stale. Tyler's graduation tickets lay on his bed, waiting for a ceremony that would not come on schedule. That evening, while search teams continued their expanded efforts, Sandra Fletcher found herself drawn to her basement, where dusty boxes held memories of her late husband, Greg. Something about the sheriff's revelation had triggered a memory, something Emma had once mentioned about her father's knowledge of the mountains. At 8:35 that night, Sandra knelt on the concrete floor, surrounded by photo albums she hadn't opened in years. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through images of a younger Emma hiking alongside her father in remote areas of Eagle Cap Wilderness. One particular photo caught her attention. 10-year-old Emma and Greg standing beside a narrow path, barely visible among the trees, mountains rising in the background. The next morning, Sandra brought the albums to Sheriff Hawkins's office. "Greg knew trails that weren't on any maps," she explained, pointing to several photographs. "He was a forestry consultant before his accident. Emma grew up exploring these places with him. She might have suggested an alternative route to avoid the more touristy areas." Hawkins studied the photographs with newfound interest. "This could explain why they didn't take the main roads," he acknowledged. "Do you have any idea which unofficial routes they might have chosen?" Within hours, the digital map at the search headquarters had been updated with red lines marking unofficial trails based on Sandra's information and consultations with local guides who had known Greg Fletcher. "Only hunters and people really familiar with the area know these passages," one guide commented as search teams with heavy backpacks departed along the newly identified routes. "Some of these trails disappear and reappear depending on the season, If they went this way, they either had excellent knowledge or were following someone who did. On the 7th day of searching, a middle-aged couple entered the operations center, looking hesitant but determined. Martha and Jim Ryder had been camping in a remote area and had just returned to civilization, unaware of the ongoing search until they stopped for supplies in town. "We saw a turquoise van 3 days ago," Jim explained, catching the immediate attention of everyone in the room. "It was parked off Forest Road 7, near where it meets Elkhorn Creek." Jim sketched a rough map on a napkin, his weathered hands working with surprising precision. "It was here, partially hidden among the trees. Thought it was odd to see a vehicle that far out, especially one that didn't look built for those roads." Sheriff Hawkins immediately redirected search efforts. A helicopter changed course to fly over the new area of interest, while ground teams rushed to reach the location before sunset. Sandra watched these developments from home, her phone pressed against her ear, as Robert Monroe provided updates from the search headquarters. The ground team arrived at the location as dusk was setting in, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. Although the van was nowhere to be found, they discovered clear evidence of recent activity: a circle of stones containing cold ashes from a campfire, and an empty energy bar wrapper with a May 2016 expiration date. "Something large was definitely parked here recently," Sheriff Hawkins noted, examining an area of flattened vegetation nearby. "The soil is still compacted." That night, search leaders gathered to recalibrate their strategy once again. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. If the friends had been at this location, where had they gone? Why would they leave the established camping area? Had they continued deeper into the wilderness, or had they been forced to move? "If they were here and then moved, we need to determine why," Hawkins said, drawing new search perimeters on the map. "Were they following a plan, or were they compelled by circumstances, or someone, to relocate?" The following morning, search teams expanded outward from the campsite location, meticulously combing the surrounding area for any sign of the 7 friends or their turquoise van. The professional searchers were now joined by dozens of volunteers from Ashland, including many fellow students who refused to wait passively for news of their missing friends. As the afternoon wore on, one of the search dogs, a German shepherd named Ranger, suddenly became agitated, pulling his handler toward a muddy embankment near a swollen stream about half a mile from the campsite. The handler followed, allowing the dog to lead him to what appeared to be a partially buried object. Carefully brushing away the mud, the handler revealed a flash of bright red fabric. His heart sank as he recognized what it was: a distinctive red jacket, torn and stained with what appeared to be dried blood. The handler immediately radioed Sheriff Hawkins, who arrived within minutes to secure the area. As the search team gathered around the disturbing discovery, the dog handler gently extracted the jacket from the mud. The fabric was unmistakable, and the damage to it suggested violence rather than a simple accident. The red jacket, matted with mud and stained with what appeared to be dried blood, sent shockwaves through the search operation. Sheriff Hawkins immediately called for the area to be cordoned off with yellow crime scene tape, while forensic photographers methodically documented the location where the jacket was found. The mood shifted palpably, as searchers who had been looking for lost hikers now found themselves processing what appeared to be a crime scene. "Bag it carefully," Hawkins instructed a technician who gently placed Emma's jacket into a sealed evidence bag, labeling it with precise coordinates and the date. The bright red fabric, now darkened with dirt and ominous stains, seemed to accuse them all of having failed its owner. By 11:20 the next morning, Sandra Fletcher sat in Sheriff Hawkins's office, her hands trembling as she identified the jacket through its clear plastic containment. "It's hers," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Greg gave it to her when she turned 14, right before he died. She would never take it off voluntarily, especially not in the mountains." The reality of what the blood-stained garment might mean suddenly overwhelmed Sandra, and she collapsed back into her chair, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "There's blood! Oh my God, there's blood on her jacket!" she gasped as a female deputy attempted to comfort her, offering water and gentle reassurances that felt hollow against the weight of this discovery. That afternoon, an FBI helicopter descended on a field adjacent to the sheriff's department. Special Agent Thomas Reed, 42, stepped out in an impeccable dark suit despite the rugged surroundings, followed by 4 specialists in missing persons cases. The local investigation had officially escalated to a federal matter. Within hours, the conference room at the sheriff's department had been transformed into a command center, with Agent Reed studying detailed topographical maps of the region while briefing both local law enforcement and the families of the missing students. "We need to treat this as a possible multiple abduction until proven otherwise," he explained, his measured tone doing little to soften the brutal shift in perspective. Inside the FBI's mobile laboratory, a forensic technician examined the bloodstains on Emma's jacket under specialized lighting. "The spatter pattern indicates traumatic force, not natural dripping from a wound," she explained to Agent Reed. "Someone was struck while wearing this jacket, or immediately after it was removed." Outside, the search expanded with new technology and urgency. Drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras methodically quartered the search area, while FBI agents began interviewing university classmates and faculty in empty classrooms. Photographs of the 7 missing students spread across tables as they sought any detail that might help explain their disappearance. The small town of Ashland, unaccustomed to such attention, found itself overrun with media. A local hotel lobby had transformed into an impromptu press room, national network reporters broadcasting live updates with sensationalist chyrons, "Mystery in the Forest," "Blood Found," and "College Students Vanish, Foul Play Suspected." The families, once united in hope, began to fracture under the strain of this new reality. At a local church serving as a gathering place, Robert Monroe engaged in a heated discussion with Jason Chen's father. "We can't let them turn our children into statistics or entertainment," Robert insisted, his face flushed with anger and fear. "We need to control the narrative before they sensationalize everything." While the public face of the investigation grew increasingly chaotic, Agent Reed worked methodically through the night. At 2:15 in the morning, his hotel room walls covered with photos and timelines, he discovered something troubling in old reports from the local sheriff's department. A report dated February 3rd detailed suspicious nighttime activity, possible unauthorized campsite, in the exact same region where Emma's jacket had been found. The report, signed by Forest Ranger Patrick Doyle, had been filed but apparently never investigated. Reed immediately called his supervisor in Washington, D.C. "Something doesn't add up," Reed explained, fatigue evident in his voice. "This report should have generated at least a verification patrol. Instead, it was filed away and forgotten, in the same area where we now have evidence of potential violence." The following morning, Reed confronted Sheriff Hawkins with the report, watching the local law enforcement officer's body language carefully. "Why was this archived without investigation?" Reed asked directly, noticing how Hawkins avoided eye contact, shuffling papers on his desk as if looking for an answer among them. "We get dozens of these reports, Agent Reed," Hawkins replied defensively. "Hikers see shadows, hunters make noise, campers go off trail. We don't have the manpower to chase down every possible unauthorized campsite in 300,000 acres of wilderness." Reed was about to press further when the radio on Hawkins's desk crackled to life with an urgent call. "Sheriff, this is Search Team Delta. You need to get out here immediately. We've found the van." Within 30 minutes, Reed and Hawkins were aboard a helicopter heading toward the coordinates provided by the search team. Below them, the wilderness stretched endlessly, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within its bounds. The helicopter descended toward a remote boggy area where several figures could be seen surrounding what appeared to be a partially submerged vehicle. As they landed and approached on foot, the turquoise paint of the van became visible through the mud and water. A forensic team in waterproof coveralls was already working to secure cables to extract the vehicle from the bog. Reed circled the scene, pulling on latex gloves as he approached the exposed side of the van. "Look here," he said, pointing to 3 distinct holes in the driver's side door. High-powered rifle shots, probably .30-06 hunting ammunition. This wasn't an accident. As the van was slowly winched from the mire, water cascading from its doors and windows, the full horror of the scene became apparent. The interior revealed open backpacks, scattered camping equipment, soaked maps, and a broken camera, clear evidence of a hasty departure or worse. A technician carefully removed Jason Chen's water-damaged phone from beneath the passenger seat, placing it in a specialized container for preservation and possible data recovery. While the technician worked to secure the scene, Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Looking closely at the bullet holes in the van's side, he realized they were positioned precisely where the driver's torso would have been. These weren't warning shots, but a deliberate attempt to kill. The precision of the bullet holes chilled Agent Reed to his core. This was no longer a search for lost hikers. It was a hunt for both victims and perpetrators. The extraction of the van continued methodically, the winch straining against the suction of the bog as forensic technicians photographed every angle of the emerging vehicle. As more of the van became visible, the extent of the damage revealed itself. Not just the bullet holes in the driver's side, but a shattered back window and deep scratches along the passenger side, consistent with a vehicle being driven recklessly through dense brush. A team of forensic specialists in waterproof coveralls worked in knee-deep mud, installing cables and pulleys to extract the van without compromising potential evidence. Water and mud cascaded from the doors as the vehicle was finally pulled onto solid ground, revealing an interior that told a story of panic and hasty escape. 3 distinct impact points, Reed noted, circling the vehicle with latex gloves on his hands. High-velocity rounds, likely from a hunting rifle. The shooter knew what they were doing. Inside the van, the chaos was telling. Backpacks had been ripped open, camping equipment scattered haphazardly, maps now illegible from water damage. A broken camera lay beneath the driver's seat, its memory card missing. Most disturbing was the distribution of personal items, as if 7 people had simultaneously grabbed what they could carry and fled in different directions. The technician carefully removed Jason Chen's waterlogged phone from under the passenger seat, placing it in a specialized container designed to prevent further degradation. "If there's anything recoverable on this device, our lab in Portland will find it," he assured Reed. Back at the sheriff's office later that day, Reed confronted Hawkins directly. "I want all reports of suspicious activity in that region for the past 6 months, he demanded, his voice controlled but tense. "All of them, Hawkins, not just the ones you deemed worth investigating." The sheriff's discomfort was palpable as he wiped sweat from his brow. "My department has jurisdiction here, Reed. I don't appreciate federal agents steamrolling into my territory," he responded, deliberately avoiding eye contact. With the stack of files Reed had referenced, while this bureaucratic standoff unfolded, Sandra Fletcher took matters into her own hands. At the local hardware store, she filled a shopping cart with flashlights, whistles, maps, and first aid supplies. "I'm not going to sit around waiting anymore," she told the 20 local volunteers she had assembled in the parking lot. "We're going to find my daughter and her friends." At the bog site, tracking specialists analyzed the ground surrounding the van, using plaster casts to preserve footprints before they disappeared. "We've identified at least 5 distinct patterns, all heading in different directions," one tracker explained to Reed. "It appears they split up intentionally, a classic evasion tactic." Meanwhile, in an FBI technology laboratory, a data recovery specialist connected Jason's damaged phone to specialized equipment. "The water damage is extensive, but the memory chip appears intact," she explained to her team. "If there's data to be salvaged, we'll extract it." While the phone analysis continued, another FBI team methodically searched the dormitory rooms of Jason and Tyler in Ashland. They collected laptops, notebooks, and any potential evidence that might shed light on why 7 college students had ventured off the established trails into an area where they encountered what appeared to be lethal danger. The browser history recovered from Jason's laptop revealed searches for illegal operations in national forests and how to report suspicious activities to the DEA in the weeks leading up to the trip. This discovery shifted the investigation significantly. We're considering the possibility that they witnessed something, possibly drug production in the remote area, Reed explained during a video conference with his supervisor in Washington. Jason's search history suggests they may have stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see. As darkness fell, Sandra Fletcher and her volunteer search party traversed an unmapped trail, distributing flyers with photos of the missing students to the occasional hunters and campers they encountered. Her determination was fueled by a mother's refusal to give up, even as official search parameters shifted from rescue to potential recovery. Night settled over the improvised base camp where Reed studied maps by lantern light, tracing possible escape routes from the van's location. The bullet trajectory analysis suggested the shots had come from higher ground to the northeast, a perfect ambush position overlooking the boggy area where the van was found. Just after midnight, the data recovery technician called Reed with urgency in her voice. "Agent Reed, you need to see this," she said, transferring the first salvage data to his secure tablet. "We've recovered a partial image, the last one taken before the phone was damaged." Reed stared at the corrupted image as it loaded on his screen. Despite the digital artifacts and water damage, the content was unmistakable, a structure hidden among trees, partially camouflaged with brush and netting. In the foreground stood a man with what appeared to be a rifle, his face mostly obscured by shadow. But what sent a surge of adrenaline through Reed was the detail visible on the man's shoulder, the distinctive patch and uniform of the United States Forest Service. The technician enhanced a portion of the image, confirming Reed's suspicion. "That's definitely a Forest Service uniform," she said, pointing to the emblem clearly visible despite the image corruption. "And there appears to be a badge, partially visible as well." Reed immediately called his team together. This was no longer just a missing persons case or even a potential homicide. It was possibly something far more insidious, involving corrupted officials. As the implications sank in, the recovered phone chimed with an automated notification as more data was salvaged, revealing the exact GPS coordinates where the photo had been taken. The image with the Forest Service uniform changed everything. Reed immediately secured the evidence in an encrypted server accessible only to a trusted circle within the FBI. This discovery couldn't be shared broadly, not when it suggested possible involvement of local authorities in whatever had happened to the 7 students. "This operation needs to go dark," Reed told his most trusted team members in his hotel room at 3 a.m. On his laptop screen, a web of connections grew as he mapped out possibilities. "From this moment, we operate on a need-to-know basis." Reed requested additional agents from the Portland field office, carefully phrasing his request to avoid specifics over potentially monitored channels. "We need specialized terrain support for evidence recovery," he said, using the pre-arranged language that indicated possible corruption of local officials. Dawn broke over the search area with teams mobilizing in a pattern that appeared random to observers, but was actually designed to focus resources on the coordinates extracted from Jason's phone. Sheriff Hawkins attempted to redirect these efforts, citing more promising areas to the south. "My men already thoroughly searched that northern section," Hawkins insisted during the morning briefing, his finger tapping emphatically on the map. "We're wasting resources revisiting cleared zones." Reed nodded politely while ignoring the suggestion entirely. The sheriff's eagerness to steer them away only reinforced his suspicions. Meanwhile, Sandra Fletcher's volunteer group had discovered a promising lead. A former military member among her volunteers noticed broken branches in a pattern inconsistent with animal movement. "Someone came through here deliberately," he told Sandra, pointing to the distinct way the foliage had been disturbed. "And recently." Following this trail, the group discovered an abandoned campsite hidden in a small clearing, the remains of a hastily extinguished fire, empty food cans, and most disturbingly, spent ammunition casings scattered around the perimeter. Sandra photographed everything meticulously, particularly the ammunition casings, which she sent to a friend who was a hunting enthusiast. His response came quickly. High-caliber rounds, type used in precision rifles, not typical hunting ammunition. While Sandra's group continued their search, Reed bypassed Sheriff Hawkins entirely by visiting the Town Hall Records office. A reluctant clerk handed over the Forest Service employee records after some persuasion. "The sheriff said I needed his approval," she explained nervously, "but technically, these are public records." Within the files, Reed found what he was looking for. Patrick Doyle, the ranger who had filed the suspicious activity report in February, had requested medical leave on May 29, 2016, just 1 week after the student's disappearance. More interesting still, the leave request had been approved and signed by Sheriff Hawkins himself, despite Hawkins having no direct administrative authority over Forest Service personnel. As evening approached, Reed drove alone to Doyle's registered address, a rural property 20 miles outside town. The house appeared abandoned, windows boarded up, mailbox overflowing with untouched correspondence. Reed parked down the road and approached on foot, using the gathering darkness as cover. Finding a rear door with a broken lock, Reed entered with his flashlight held low to avoid visible beams from outside. The interior told the story of a hasty departure, furniture covered with sheets, drawers left partially open, and most tellingly, ashes in the fireplace containing partially burned documents. Reed photographed everything before carefully collecting samples of the ashes. Whatever Doyle had burned, he'd wanted it completely destroyed. The house felt like it had been abandoned in a rush, not like someone planning a medical leave. Back in Ashland, FBI agent Julie Martinez had uncovered another disturbing pattern while reviewing digitized police reports. Over the past 5 years, there had been multiple reports of strange sightings in the same region: lights at night, unusual vehicle activity, sounds of machinery, all documented and then summarily dismissed as unfounded by the sheriff's department. "Look at this timeline," Martinez showed Reed the next morning, pointing to a pattern on her laptop. "Every year, same region, same response pattern. Case closed by the sheriff's office without proper investigation." The pieces were forming a disturbing picture. Reed contacted a federal judge he trusted, bypassing the local judicial system to obtain search warrants for both the coordinates from Jason's phone and the property registered to the Hawkins family outside the county lines. "We need to move carefully," Reed told his team. "If local officials are involved in whatever operation the students stumbled upon, they'll be monitoring our movements." As preparations for the covert operation continued, Sandra's team made another discovery. While reviewing her photographs of the abandoned campsite, Sandra noticed a partially obscured boot print with a distinctive tread pattern. Her military volunteer identified it immediately. "That's a standard-issue Forest Service boot. New model. Only distributed to rangers in the past 2 years." Reed's suspicions solidified. The evidence increasingly pointed to Forest Service involvement, potentially working in coordination with local law enforcement. The question remained: what illicit operation could command such protection and justify the apparent murder of 7 college students? As dusk fell, Reed finalized plans for a pre-dawn operation to investigate the coordinates from Jason's phone without alerting Hawkins or his deputies. Everything was in place when Sandra's phone chimed with an incoming message. The text came from an unknown number. "Your daughter is still alive. Find the abandoned warehouse at Hawkins Lumber. Come alone or they all die." Attached was a photo dated just 2 days ago showing Emma, pale and injured but unmistakably alive, sitting against a concrete wall with a newspaper partially visible beside her. Proof of life. Sandra stared at her phone, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. Emma was alive. After all these days of searching, of fearing the worst, her daughter was alive. Injured, clearly terrified, but alive. The timestamp on the photo showed it was taken just 48 hours ago. For several agonizing minutes, Sandra debated what to do. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to rush to the Hawkins lumber warehouse immediately, alone as instructed, to save her child. But the rational part of her mind, the part that had kept her functioning through this nightmare, recognized the obvious trap. The question wasn't whether to go, she would walk through fire for Emma, but whether to tell Agent Reed first. By 3:17 that morning, Sandra sat at her kitchen table, the message open on her phone, an enlarged version of Emma's photo displayed on her laptop. She scrutinized every detail: the concrete wall behind Emma, the visible bruising on her daughter's face, the newspaper partially visible to establish the date. This was no digital manipulation. The forensic photographer in Sandra recognized authentic details that would be nearly impossible to fake. Dawn found Sandra at the municipal archives, requesting old records about Hawkins Lumber. An elderly clerk with sympathetic eyes helped her locate the property records. The mill was the Hawkins family business for generations, the woman explained, pulling out a dusty folder. Bill inherited everything when his father passed. Strange how he went into law enforcement instead of running the family business. Sandra spread an old property map across her kitchen table later that morning. The abandoned lumber mill sat 40 miles from town, near the national forest boundary. Remote, isolated, perfect for hiding someone. Or something. While Sandra investigated the lumber mill, Reed and his team were preparing for their covert operation to the coordinates extracted from Jason's phone. They checked equipment, studied topographical maps, and established emergency extraction protocols. The operation was set for dawn the following day. At 2:30 that afternoon, Sandra finally made the call she'd been avoiding. "I received something you need to see immediately," she told Reed, her voice unsteady as she forwarded the photo through the secure messaging app he'd set up for their communications. Reed was in his hotel room within 20 minutes, enlarging the image on his tablet while a forensic specialist examined it via video call. The metadata fragments suggest this was taken approximately 48 hours ago, the specialist confirmed. The lighting, shadows, and newspaper visible are consistent with that time frame. This appears genuine. The tension in the room was palpable as Reed and Sandra faced each other across the small hotel desk. "It's obviously a trap," Reed said bluntly. "But we can't ignore the possibility your daughter is alive. You're not going alone." Agent Martinez arrived shortly afterward with additional disturbing information. She'd visited the local electric company and discovered the Hawkins property still had active service. "The meter at the Hawkins mill shows regular power consumption for the past 5 years," she explained. "Someone is definitely using that place, despite its allegedly abandoned status." Reed immediately attempted to secure a warrant by phone, but encountered unexpected resistance. "I need the district attorney's signature for a property with these jurisdictional specificities," the judge explained apologetically. When Reed tried to contact the district attorney, his secretary reported he was out of town for 48 hours and unreachable for emergency authorizations. Meanwhile, the forensic lab reported another breakthrough from the van examination. "We found partial fingerprints on the steering wheel that don't match any of the students," the technician told Reed. "We're running them through every database we can access." Sandra spent the afternoon reviewing old photo albums, searching for any information about the lumber mill that might help. She found a picture of 12-year-old Emma with her father standing in front of the old Hawkins warehouse during a hiking trip. Greg had been teaching Emma orienteering that summer, taking her to landmarks throughout the region. The mill would be familiar territory to Emma, perhaps why the kidnappers chose it. With time running short and bureaucratic obstacles mounting, Reed made a difficult decision. "We can't wait for the warrant," he told his core team of 6 agents. "Officially, we're volunteers assisting in the search. Unofficially, we're conducting reconnaissance on a potential hostage situation." The operation briefing took place at midnight in Reed's hotel room. "Sandra will be visible, apparently alone, approaching as instructed," Reed explained, pointing to a satellite image of the property. "We'll have 3 strategic observation points with communication and intervention capability. If it's a trap, we'll be prepared." As dawn approached, Sandra prepared for her role, putting on a bulletproof vest beneath her jacket, while Reed adjusted the concealed microphone. At the first sign of danger, you exit immediately, Reed instructed, his eyes conveying the seriousness that his calm voice masked. Understood? Sandra nodded, her thoughts only on Emma. 5 years of nursing experience had taught her to function under pressure, to compartmentalize fear. She would need all that training now. The team was making final preparations, checking weapons and communication equipment, when Reed's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed FBI Quantico, unusual at this hour. Reed answered, listening intently, his expression growing increasingly concerned. The partial fingerprint from the van finally got a match, he announced, after ending the call. It belongs to Carl Whitman, former Marine Corps sniper with distinguished service in Afghanistan and Iraq. Reed pulled up Whitman's file on his tablet, showing the team a photo of a hard-faced man in his early 40s. He now works as a deputy forest ranger in Wallowa County, directly under Sheriff Hawkins's jurisdiction. Reed's revelation about Carl Whitman sent a chill through the team. A former Marine sniper now working under Hawkins, this wasn't just corruption. It was a militarized operation with deadly capabilities. Reed quietly distributed Whitman's photo to everyone, ensuring his face was committed to memory. Consider him armed and extremely dangerous, Reed instructed, his voice low and controlled. He has advanced military training in tracking and ambush tactics. If he's involved in whatever happened to these students, we're dealing with a professional killer. The pre-dawn sky was still dark as the team finalized their preparations, adding extra ballistic protection and communication redundancies. No one verbalized the escalated stakes, but the atmosphere had shifted from tense to grave. They were potentially facing a trained combat veteran who had already demonstrated willingness to use lethal force against civilians. At 5:30 in the morning, the FBI team positioned their unmarked vehicles along the forest road leading to the abandoned lumber mill. The early morning fog provided additional cover as they established their observation posts. The isolated valley that housed the Hawkins mill appeared dormant through night vision equipment, a main warehouse, 2 smaller outbuildings, and an old manager's house, all seemingly vacant except for the telltale signs of recent activity that only trained observers would notice. Tire tracks less than a week old, a generator exhaust vent recently used, blinds in one window slightly askew. Sandra drove alone down the dirt road, her heart hammering so violently she felt lightheaded. "I'm approximately 2 kilometers from the entrance," she whispered into her concealed microphone. No visible activity. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension and determination. Somewhere in those buildings, Emma might be waiting, her daughter, alive but suffering, a miracle and a horror simultaneously. Agents positioned with binoculars and thermal imaging equipment scanned the property perimeter as Sandra parked where instructed, 50 yards from the main entrance, clearly visible from multiple vantage points. She stepped out of her vehicle slowly, making a show of looking around nervously, playing the part of a desperate mother who had come alone as demanded. At 6:45, her phone chimed with a text message. "Enter the main warehouse. Go alone to the back. Look for the tree symbol on the floor." The origin number showed as unknown, the same as the previous message. Sandra relayed the instructions through her microphone and walked deliberately toward the massive wooden doors of the main warehouse. One of them stood slightly ajar, an invitation or a trap. Pushing it open, she entered a cavernous space where dust motes danced in beams of early morning light filtering through dirty windows. Ancient machinery sat draped in grimy tarps, silent witnesses to decades of abandonment. "I'm inside," Sandra whispered, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior, moving toward the back as instructed. The warehouse felt both empty and watchful as she navigated between obstacles, her footsteps echoing slightly, despite her attempt to move quietly. At the rear of the building, Sandra methodically scanned the floor until she spotted it. A pine tree symbol carved into a section of wooden flooring, nearly invisible beneath years of dust, except for the recently disturbed area around it. Kneeling down, Sandra brushed away more dust to reveal a cleverly camouflaged trapdoor. Reed's voice came urgently through her earpiece. "Sandra, stop now. Don't go down until we verify." But maternal instinct overwhelmed caution. Sandra had already pulled the trapdoor open, revealing metal steps descending into darkness. "I can see emergency lights below," she whispered, already placing her foot on the first step. "I'm going down." The underground tunnel was unexpectedly modern compared to the decrepit warehouse above. Reinforced walls, low-intensity emergency lighting, and a concrete floor showing recent footprints in the dust. Sandra followed the passage approximately 30 meters until it opened into a small room that made her gasp. A thin mattress with rumpled blankets occupied one corner. Empty water, bottles and used bandages were scattered near it. But most disturbing were the photographs taped to one wall. Surveillance images of all 7 students, clearly taken without their knowledge before the disappearance. Each face was circled, with notes scribbled beside them in an unfamiliar hand. "Reed," Sandra whispered. "Someone was monitoring them before they disappeared. They were targeted." Her heart froze when she recognized Emma's red jacket hanging on a hook. Not the one found in the mud, but its twin, the spare Sandra had been clutching at home. They had been in her house, taken it from Emma's closet. Searching the walls with trembling hands, Sandra discovered a loose brick that concealed a small cavity. Inside was a notebook she instantly recognized. Emma's distinctive handwriting filled its pages. Sandra had found her daughter's diary. Simultaneously, at the forest's edge, an agent reported movement through his radio. Movement northeast, approximately 200 meters. One person, moving furtively toward the manager's house. Reed and 2 agents silently repositioned to intercept, moving through the underbrush with practiced efficiency. They surrounded the figure, a bearded man in filthy clothes with the wild-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept in days. When he tried to flee, his exhaustion betrayed him, and he collapsed after just 20 meters. Rolling the man onto his back, Reed immediately recognized him from official photographs. "Patrick Doyle? We've been looking for you for weeks," Reed said, as the man trembled beneath him. "They'll come back," Doyle whispered hoarsely, eyes darting frantically. "They always come back to clean up the evidence." While Reed questioned the terrified ranger and Sandra began reading Emma's diary, which horrifyingly detailed torture and interrogations about what they really saw in the forest, silent alarms triggered on the team's equipment. 3 vehicles were rapidly approaching on the forest road. The radio scanner intercepted a chilling communication. "Unit 1 to base, confirming total cleanup at Hawkins' location. No witnesses." Reed's blood ran cold at the intercepted communication. They had minutes, perhaps seconds, before a heavily armed cleanup team arrived. "All units, defensive position," he commanded through his radio, voice tense but controlled. 3 vehicles approaching, likely hostile. "Protect Mrs. Fletcher and witness Doyle immediately." Sandra, still in the underground room, frantically skimmed Emma's diary under the dim emergency lighting. "Day 3. They've separated us. I heard gunshots. I think they killed Tyler and the twins. The man who identifies himself as a forest ranger keeps asking what exactly we saw at the delivery site." Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, each entry more disturbing than the last. Outside, agents were positioning Doyle in a secure transport vehicle while he continued his broken confession. "Hawkins controls everything in the county. The meth operation has existed for over a decade. When I refused to participate fully, he threatened my family." The ranger's eyes darted nervously toward the forest road. "I tried to sabotage the search, to buy time, but then I couldn't live with myself anymore." 3 pickup trucks approached the property, Sheriff Hawkins leading in the first vehicle, with Carl Whitman riding shotgun. Behind them came 4 additional armed men, all communicating through tactical radios and checking weapons with practiced efficiency. They moved with the coordination of those who had done this before, many times. Reed strategically positioned his team, sending 2 agents to extract Sandra through a secondary exit from the bunker, while others prepared an ambush for the approaching cleanup crew. "Remember, we need prisoners for testimony," Reed reminded his team. Lethal force only as absolute last resort. While being guided toward extraction, Sandra discovered a hand-drawn map in Emma's diary showing the location of a hunter's cabin where she and Marcus had planned to hide after escaping. "This is where they might be," Sandra whispered urgently to her escort. "We need to get to this cabin." Hawkins and his men entered the main warehouse cautiously, using hand signals to communicate as they spread out in a practiced formation. "Check the bunker, then burn everything," Hawkins instructed in a low voice. "Make it look like old electrical wiring. Should have demolished this place years ago." The tension escalated when one of Hawkins's men discovered evidence of Sandra's recent presence, a water bottle she had dropped in her haste to examine the diary. "Someone's been here," the man hissed, alerting the others, who immediately drew weapons and moved into defensive positions. Reed initiated the operation with perfect timing. "FBI, freeze, drop your weapons." The command echoed through the warehouse, followed immediately by the crack of gunfire as Carl Whitman instinctively fired toward the sound, demonstrating the hair-trigger reflexes of his military training. Chaos erupted inside the warehouse, agents returning fire, Hawkins's men diving for cover behind machinery, the sheriff himself seizing the momentary confusion to slip out through a rear exit. Reed pursued him, while the other agents engaged the remaining suspects, the confined space filling with gun smoke and shouted commands. Sandra and her two escort agents ran through the forest toward their extraction vehicle, the sounds of gunfire echoing behind them. "We have the diary, and know where Emma might be," Sandra gasped as they reached the concealed SUV. "We need to move now." Meanwhile, Doyle, secured in an FBI vehicle with an agent standing guard, provided crucial details about the operation's true headquarters. "The real operation isn't here. It's in an abandoned mine 15 kilometers north. All the records, the major lab, everything is there." His hands shook as he drew a rough map. "Hawkins has at least 5 deputies involved, plus 3 forest rangers. They use the badges to transport product across county lines without inspection." Through the dense forest, Reed pursued Hawkins with single-minded determination. The sheriff demonstrated intimate knowledge of the terrain, using fallen trees and stream beds for cover as he attempted to circle back toward the vehicles. Reed maintained pursuit, forced to rely on training rather than local knowledge. The forest chase led to a small clearing where Reed finally cornered Hawkins, both men with weapons drawn in a tense standoff. "It's over, Bill," Reed said, breathing hard but keeping his aim steady. "We have Doyle. We have the diary. We know about the mine operation." A disturbing smile spread across Hawkins's weathered face, revealing a man untroubled by the collapse of his criminal enterprise. "You think you know something?" he chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Right now, Whitman is heading to the cabin at the north coordinate to clean up the 2 survivors, the camera girl and the basketball player. They're the last ones. The implication hit Reed like a physical blow. While they had been focused on securing the lumber mill, the most dangerous member of the conspiracy was already en route to finish what they had started 5 years ago. "Where exactly is this cabin?" Reed demanded, closing the distance between them. "How much of a head start does Whitman have?" Hawkins's smile widened. "You'll never reach them in time. Whitman was a sniper with 27 confirmed kills in Afghanistan. Those kids have been living on borrowed time for 5 years." The sheriff's eyes reflected nothing but cold calculation. "Maybe we can make a deal. I tell you the exact coordinates. You put in a good word with the prosecutor." Reed's radio crackled. With an update from the warehouse, the situation was contained. 3 suspects in custody, 1 dead. But Carl Whitman was not among them. He had separated from the group before their arrival and had at least a 30-minute head start to wherever Emma and Marcus were hiding. Reed didn't waste a second. With his weapon trained on Hawkins, he called for backup to secure the sheriff while simultaneously extracting the exact coordinates of the hunter's cabin. "You're going to tell me precisely where that cabin is, or I promise you'll face every possible charge the federal system can throw at you," Reed threatened, his voice deadly calm. Recognizing the inevitability of his situation, Hawkins reluctantly provided the coordinates. Within minutes, Reed had mobilized every available resource toward the remote cabin where Emma and Marcus might be hiding, and where Whitman was headed to eliminate the final witnesses. "I need all air resources at these coordinates immediately," Reed commanded at the temporary command center, adrenaline coursing through his system. "Whitman has at most 30 minutes head start. We need to intercept him before he reaches the cabin." The FBI scrambled 2 helicopters, one carrying Reed, Sandra, and a tactical team, the other providing aerial surveillance and support. As they lifted off, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising complications for the aerial operation. "There's a storm system moving in," the pilot warned, checking weather radar. "We have maybe 45 minutes before it forces us to abort the air operation." Sandra clutched Emma's diary and the hand-drawn map, shouting directions over the rotor noise. "There's a stream that forks here." She pointed to a geographical feature becoming visible below. "The cabin should be just beyond this ridge." While the rescue operation raced against time, another FBI team stormed the abandoned mine Doyle had identified. What they discovered confirmed the scope of the operation: a sophisticated industrial-scale methamphetamine laboratory with chemical tanks, filtration equipment, and production lines capable of producing millions of dollars worth of product monthly. Agent Martinez discovered a hastily abandoned safe in the mine office, photographing financial documents showing coded payments to H Office and State Project Oversight, thinly veiled references to corrupted officials at both county and state levels. In the helicopter, tension mounted as the storm clouds darkened the sky, reducing visibility and creating increasingly dangerous flying conditions. "We've got 30 minutes maximum before this storm forces us to ground," the pilot informed Reed grimly. The thermal imaging operator suddenly called out, "Structure located, and we have a vehicle approaching on the East Trail, approximately 2 kilometers away." Everyone crowded around the monitor, which showed 2 distinct heat signatures inside the cabin, one moving about, the other stationary, possibly lying down. "It's her! Emma's alive!" Sandra gasped, gripping Reed's arm tightly. "We have to reach them before he does." With limited options for landing in the dense forest, the pilot identified a small clearing 800 meters from the cabin. The second helicopter deployed agents to intercept Whitman's approaching vehicle, while Reed led 4 agents and Sandra in a desperate sprint through the forest, racing against both the impending storm and the deadliest member of the conspiracy. Whitman had abandoned his vehicle where the trail became impassable, continuing on foot with his sniper rifle. He moved with the silent efficiency of a predator, decades of military and hunting experience evident in his ghost-like progress through the underbrush. Inside the rustic hunter's cabin, Emma Fletcher, pale and visibly exhausted after 5 years in hiding, tended to Marcus Washington, who lay on an improvised mattress with his leg wrapped in dirty bandages. The wound had clearly become infected, and Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his forehead burning with fever. The distant sound of helicopter rotors caught Emma's attention. After years of hypervigilance, she had developed almost supernatural hearing. Moving to the cabin's single window, she caught a glimpse of the aircraft through the trees before it disappeared behind the ridge. Uncertain whether this represented rescue or another threat, Emma barricaded the door with the cabin's meager furniture, then took up a makeshift knife fashioned from a broken hunting knife. "Someone's coming, Marcus," she whispered to her semi-conscious friend. "I don't know if it's help or them." Rain began to fall, quickly transforming the forest floor into slick mud. Reed and his team pushed forward against the deteriorating conditions, the sound of thunder providing an ominous backdrop to their desperate race. Whitman, meanwhile, had reached the edge of the small clearing where the cabin stood. With the patience of a professional killer, he assembled his rifle and settled into position, using the scope to observe the cabin. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of movement, Emma's shadow passing before the dirty glass. A cold smile crossed his face as he began to calculate wind speed and distance. Reed's team approached from the opposite direction, using the intensifying rainfall as cover for their footsteps. They were 300 meters out when Sandra stumbled on a hidden route, the noise causing Emma inside the cabin to freeze in terror. Hearing footsteps approaching the cabin door, Emma quickly helped Marcus into a hiding space beneath the floorboards, a small storage cellar accessible through a trapdoor. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, covering him with an old tarp before closing the trapdoor and concealing it beneath a ragged rug. Taking up position beside the door with her makeshift knife, Emma prepared for what she believed would be her final stand. 5 years of hiding, of witnessing her friends' murders, of surviving against impossible odds had hardened the once carefree college student into someone willing to fight to the death. The door burst open violently, pushed by the storm wind and someone's shoulder. Emma lunged forward with her improvised weapon, only to freeze in absolute shock as she recognized not her pursuer's face, but her mother's. For a split second, time seemed suspended in disbelief until the cabin window shattered with the crack of a high-powered rifle shot, sending glass spraying across the room between them. "Mom?" Emma's voice broke as she stood frozen in disbelief, the makeshift knife trembling in her hand. The gunshot's echo still hung in the air as Reed tackled both women to the floor, glass crunching beneath them. "Sniper, everyone down!" Reed shouted as 2 more shots splintered the cabin's wooden wall. The tactical team immediately took defensive positions, returning fire toward Whitman's location, while Reed pulled Emma and Sandra behind the cabin's stone fireplace, the only substantial cover in the small structure. Emma's eyes, once bright with youth but now hardened by years of survival, darted between her mother and the FBI agent. "Marcus is under the floor," she whispered urgently, pointing to the concealed trapdoor. 2 agents quickly retrieved the semi-conscious basketball player, his tall frame now gaunt and his once powerful leg grotesquely swollen with infection. Outside, the storm intensified, sheets of rain reducing visibility and turning the forest clearing into a treacherous battlefield. This worked both for and against them. Whitman's sniper effectiveness was compromised, but so was the FBI's ability to locate and neutralize him. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the surrounding forest, followed by deafening thunder that masked the sounds of movement. The medical technician from Reed's team immediately began working on Marcus, his expression grim as he assessed the infected wound. "Septic shock. We need immediate evacuation," he stated, preparing an IV of broad-spectrum antibiotics from his field kit. "His body temperature is dangerously high, and the infection has likely entered his bloodstream." While the medic worked, Emma clutched her mother's hand, 5 years of isolation crashing down as she allowed herself, for the first time, to feel something besides fear. "They killed everyone," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Tyler, the twins, Jason, Derek. They executed them one by one when they couldn't get information about where Marcus and I had gone." Sandra held her daughter tightly, unable to form words adequate for the moment. The physical changes in Emma were shocking. Her once healthy frame had become wiry and taut, her eyes constantly scanning for threats, her movements precise and economical, like a hunted animal. During a brief lull in Whitman's fire, Emma retrieved a small waterproof digital camera hidden inside a metal canteen. "I documented everything," she explained to Reed, her voice steadying with purpose. "The lab, the guards, vehicle, plates, Hawkins giving orders. I kept it hidden all these years, waiting for a chance to get it to authorities we could trust." Reed coordinated their extraction over the radio, static nearly overwhelming his transmission. "Ground evacuation required immediately. Air support compromised by weather. 2 civilian survivors need immediate medical attention." He listened to the response, grimacing at the news that the nearest ground team was still 20 minutes out. While they waited, Emma recounted their ordeal to Reed and Sandra. "We were just following an alternative trail I knew from childhood trips with Dad," she explained, the memories visibly painful. "We saw trucks in a clearing where no road should exist. When Jason took photos, we didn't realize they had perimeter guards with thermal imaging." A lightning flash illuminated her face as she continued. "We tried to leave quietly, but they spotted us. We made it back to the van, but they pursued us on ATVs. The van got stuck in mud. Tyler told us to split up in different directions. He said it would increase our chances that at least some of us would survive to report what we'd seen. The tactical team maintained a defensive perimeter as Emma's horrific account continued. She described how she and Marcus had found each other 2 days later, both injured but alive, and how they'd hidden while searching parties combed the forest. "We saw them capture Tyler and the twins, Hawkins personally." Her voice faltered. "He executed them while asking where the rest of us were hiding." Outside, Whitman continued to move tactically through the storm, using lightning flashes to reposition. The FBI agents countered by changing their defensive positions after each thunderclap, creating an eerie chess match played in deadly staccato moments of illumination. Emma's narrative continued, describing years of near captures, stealing supplies from hunting cabins, treating injuries with limited resources, and Marcus's worsening condition after being shot during their most recent relocation. "We intercepted radio communications when we could. We knew they were still looking for us. We knew they'd corrupted the investigation." Reed's radio crackled with an alarming update. Whitman's radio frequency had been identified and monitored, revealing that reinforcements were approaching from the south. They had perhaps 15 minutes before being outnumbered. The final confrontation came with devastating swiftness. Whitman, realizing his position was compromised, made a desperate assault during a particularly bright lightning flash. 3 FBI agents fired simultaneously, their bullets finding their mark. Carl Whitman, former Marine sniper and executioner for a criminal conspiracy, fell face-first into the mud, his rifle unfired in his final charge. 1 week later, in an FBI conference room in Portland, walls covered with photos, documents, and maps connected by red lines displayed the full extent of the operation. A methamphetamine empire protected by corrupted officials across 3 counties, with tentacles reaching into state regulatory agencies and even the governor's office. 47 arrests had been made, including 3 state legislators and a federal land management official. At Southern Oregon University, a solemn memorial service brought closure to a community that had waited 5 years for answers. 5 coffins lay in a row, each with a photograph of the young person whose promise had been cut short. Emma sat in a wheelchair, her body still recovering from years of malnutrition and hardship, while Marcus watched from a hospital bed that had been specially brought for the occasion, his leg saved, but his athletic career forever ended. Despite their physical limitations, both survivors sat straight-backed with determination, committed to bearing witness for their friends who could not. 6 months after the events in the forest, Emma Fletcher walked slowly across the university campus, leaning on a cane, her physical wounds still healing, the emotional ones leaving deeper scars. In her hand, she held the restored red jacket, finally returned after being processed as evidence. Sandra walked beside her, with Marcus following a few steps behind, his own recovery ongoing. They approached a small, newly inaugurated garden where 5 young trees had been planted in memory of their lost friends. Emma knelt with difficulty, carefully placing a printed copy of the group's last photo, all 7 smiling before their trip, in a small time capsule to be buried among the trees. "The truth was hidden among the trees," she said softly, "but now it will grow strong like these trees, so no one will ever forget them and what they did to expose it."